Welcome to the official podcast of FOR ETERNIA.com. We have the power. I'm your host, AJ, aka Voodoo Magic, aka Zor. And today's episode is titled The Forging of the Forge. A title perfect for this episode because today, September 6th, is the day when the first issue of a brand new 4-issue limited comic series called Masters of the Universe Forge of Destiny from Dark Horse Publishing hits comic book shelves and digital platforms everywhere. And today, we are going to discuss the forging of these new comics, a prequel story to the Masters of the Universe Revelation and Revolution animated Netflix series, followed by a discussion of some of the plot details of issue 1. And don't worry, we will give you a spoiler warning once we get there. And who else better to have this chat with than the brilliant creator himself, the writer and variant cover artist behind Masters of the Universe, Forge of Destiny, Tim Seeley. Welcome back, Tim. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, AJ. Always a pleasure.
So, Tim, before we start anything, I got your protagonist here from your 2020 comic book series, He-Man and the Masters of the Multiverse.
Yeah.
And, the origins, he Skeletor figure. And, well, so what did you think of this?
I mean, it's so cool. Obviously, when you're a little kid and you're super into your little plastic toy figure collection,
Yeah.
The idea that someday you'd have a character that you help make up, get a piece of plastic, that's the dream. So I waited in line like everyone else digitally to buy them. So I ordered myself a couple, but he's also displayed prominently in my office as well.
Just a couple? Just two?
Just two, actually, just two, and I gave one to my brother. So
Oh, wow. I think I would have gotten like 10 of them. But I do wish, and I love Mattel, but I do wish they would have put a little more effort into it, just a tiny bit. Maybe some white streaks in the hair and maybe bones on the power harness.
Oh yeah. Well, I wonder how much, because these are the exclusives. I wonder what the tooling and all that sort of stuff. I'm curious, what that kind of, what work that would take to do stuff like that. In the meantime, I suggest grabbing a little thing of whiteout and just going, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, but I don't want to take it out of the packaging. That's the thing.
You do it like you do a ship in a bottle. You just poke a hole and then you stick it in there, and then you pick it up.
You expect so much of me, Tim. I can't do that. But I do like that these new origin figures. What was I got Fangor, and the bubble packaging. Now you can remove the card backing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and not destroy the packaging to get to the figures. So I really like that they're, it looks like they're moving forward with that. Maybe because they're skipping retail now for at least the vintage figures. It's going to be all Mattel Creations exclusive starting 2024. And perhaps that's the way of the future. So I do like that. But all right, maybe I'll give that little battleship painting technique a try. Ship in a bottle. So, Tim, the last time you were on, we were celebrating the release of Masterverse and the first issue of the Masters of the Universe comic anthology series that had its debut this past February.
Wow. Yeah. Time flies.
Yeah, it really does. And so now that all 4 issues have been released and the trade is coming out next month, October 17th, I believe. So now reflecting back at it all, what do you think? Were you happy how it all came together?
Yeah, it's a crazy process, and Dark Horse was, really, it's a ton of work to wrangle that many creative teams, and I think they did an excellent job with it. I think the way that we balanced it out ended up working out pretty well. I think because of sort of the speed of some of the artists and just other factors like that, it wasn't a project where I could say hey, these two go together, It kind of had to be a little bit improv just because we were sort of waiting on people at different times. So that meant doing the framing sequence had to be a little bit flexible. But I think in the end, like I think we made something pretty cool. The goal obviously was just to give you some really cool sort of alternate versions with some great artists, and I think we did that really well. You know, I would have liked, I think, if I could have done something slightly different. I would like to have more room for the framing sequence, just so that it could be more of a sort of plot. But we're never going to get that. We were already sort of. I didn't want to cut into these shorts, and you don't want to have me expounding more on stuff when you can get like Kelly Jones or Sergio or or Fico Asio drawing this stuff. So I think it turned out great, and we worked within some minor constraints that we had to work with. But some of those stories, I think, you know, they work really well. I think they're really sort of considered from beginning to end. I think the artist really put some love into them, especially as much as I asked them to draw most of the time.
I really enjoyed, I mean, Sergio, I loved, but afterwards, issues 2, 3, and 4 came out, and I really enjoyed that issue 4 story, the Mega Beast Matrix.
Yeah, the Force one with Fico Asio. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's not Skeletor, it's not Hordak, but Modulok is being the main villain. The multiverse threat here. Infecting anything he touches. Well, organic, right? He touched Roboto, can't affect him. But it was so cool to me, and I love the way Fico was it?
Yeah.
Did the art, and so did you have a favorite anthology story out of the bunch?
I mean, the first issue, just in general, with Sergio and Kelly, those are like two dream
Yeah.
collaborators, so that was super cool for me. I really did like that last one. I thought, the one with Fico and getting to do like the modern sort of He Force thing, and have it be just like this big epic, superhero fantasy tale. That was probably my, overall that one is probably my favorite, just because it's like takes place now, and it's like in the it affects things kind of, and kind of what you said, just getting to use a villain that is kind of outside the standard, and do some stuff we haven't seen. Plus, I just got to add in every character I could think of. Like, it was just full of stuff. I was sending Pico just reference like crazy, going online and pulling out all these stuff, and we put Blast Attack in a fucking comic, for God's sake. So I think that one was really fun. The one that David Rabin did, I thought, which was the sort of Viking one. Yeah, art on that was so cool and such a unique take on stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's just I really liked the EJ Sue one, which was the sort of Japanese manga-esque influenced one. I thought that one turned out great too. But, most of it, I thought, we made something kind of cool, and I hope people had a good time with it. It was always going to be sort of a weird project, but that's kind of the stuff you can do in comics that you can't do anywhere else. So I was, just happy to mess around.
Yeah, and regarding, well, let me put a pin in that. So at the very end of Masterverse issue 4, it feels like we get a tease of what's coming next. We see Prince Adam looking out from Castle Grayskull, and we see what possibly looks like maybe a comet, reflecting in his eye. And I couldn't help, obviously, also to notice that when the Masterverse trade was announced, it said it was labeled Volume 1. So did Masterverse do okay sales-wise? I mean, as in, was Dark Horse and Mattel happy enough with the results to justify another, hopefully?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, the other side of this though is that we hit the ground from Masterverse and immediately had to work on the prequel, the Revolution stuff, because that has an impending deadline. Like there is an animated series that is going to drop, and we have to get this in before that shows up.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I think it did pretty well. I think people were happy with it. If there were to be, let's say, a lot of people asking Dark Horse for another one, that would probably help us get another one faster. But it'll be at least 4 months, because we've got to do Masters of Universe Revolution. So
yeah,
that'll be first.
Generally speaking, being someone outside of the industry, I've always been curious what the benchmark of success is, and without getting into any specifics of any specific publisher, is there like a sales benchmark usually set by a publisher, ahead of time, a sales number, a number of comics sold that determines if a comic was successful or not?
It's a great question, and it'd be really hard to answer. And I can tell you that because I have independently published stuff through Image. Because there's basically three different markets at this point that you sell your comic through, which is you've got the direct market, which is comic book stores, and so that's you're putting out your stuff. That's immediate sort of sales. Like you put it out that Wednesday, you get your sales in. Then there's also digital, which would be Comixology and all those sort of platforms. The Kindle, it's basically Kindle now. And then the other one is when you put the trade out, then you're switching over, and that's called the book market, and that is a different industry pretty much in general. I would guess, just from my own experience, something like Master of the Universe is not going to be huge in comic book stores, but it'll probably be bigger in the book market. So I think sales wise, it probably did pretty well. I don't know what the cutoff would be. You're paying for a license, so that's going to factor in. But I mean, I would guess when the trade hits, that where they really find out how it's sold. I can tell you from my previous DC stuff when I was working on Master of the Universe that Master of the Universe trades outsell the monthlies by a lot. Like the numbers on Master Multiverse trade or the numbers on Injustice Master of the Universe were way higher, overall than the monthly series. Because the kind of fans who are into this stuff don't necessarily go to the comic book store on Wednesday and don't necessarily want to wait a month and don't necessarily, there's kind of like there's like the real mainstream and then mainstream comics, which is, two different businesses completely. And I would, just from years of doing this, the Wednesday Warrior kind of comic release stuff tends to be for superheroes, and it tends to be for Marvel and DC superheroes. So a lot of, I know I personally have lived off trades for my entire 20 years of this job because that's where my stuff sells, I've always make stuff for that market pretty much, whether I try to or not. That seems to be where I make books for. So I would call that the real mainstream, and I guess that's probably where Dark Horse will say, "Oh yeah, this is exactly what we needed it to."
I used to hold so much weight in like that, top 100 ranking. I used to be a regular visitor back in the day of the website, comichron.com,
Sure.
where the public could view the top 100 comics sold in a various month. But, ever since Diamond Distribution lost the lion's share of the comic distribution business when Penguin stepped in, it's been hard to find accurate ranking data. And, so it's all a mystery to me now, but the way you're just talking here, maybe I was just holding too much importance.
It is important, but it's weird, and it's also when you'd see those rankings, it was almost always so sales are relative to a sort of a benchmark book, and it's usually Detective Comics. So usually when they would rank those, it'd be like, what is the percentage of numbers to Detective Comics or something, and that's also not really easy to do anymore. Like you said, Diamond doesn't get that information. There's multiple retailers. Like what something actually sells is kind of hard to say now. And also I think because stuff is released day and date with digital, it used to be the case that like a third of your total sales would be through Comixology or Kindle. I don't know if that's true anymore. Comixology is kind of dissipated and buried under the backyard, but
Yeah.
it's still a significant. I think on Kindle and stuff, it's still a significant amount. And then, like I said, because so much relies on the real mainstream, it's really hard to say.
Should I go deep?
Yeah, this is the weeds. This is where I live, in the weeds. So.
Well, this one might piss you off, and I don't want to get you pissed off, but it's scary too. And you're a teacher, right? You're a teacher. What do you do with what's going on with artificial intelligence? Because I mean, you're teaching these kids, about the market and being creative and either in art or in writing or what have you, and it feels like this is an unstoppable train where no matter what we do, there's going to be so many people, so many creatives out there that are going to be replaced by AI. And maybe the future of creators will be software engineers or, AI developers, or they give like one drawing to their AI program and the AI renders the entire comic book. I mean, what is your take on that?
I mean, they want you to think it's inevitable. That is what these companies want you to believe because they want to boost their stock. So they want you to invest early. And so that is part of their narrative is that it's inevitable, which is not true.
Okay.
That's just their bullshit. They're selling you something. They're always selling something. Silicon Valley is always selling stuff. I think the reality of the AI stuff is it's right now being used by a lot of people. It's the same kind of people who always run out early and try to, sort of make a bunch of money before reality sets in, which is the same people who went out and did NFTs and sort of this kind of thing. And most of the time that stuff it doesn't shake out the way that it is, that they describe it's going to, nor does it end up being worth what they think it is. So far, AI cannot do what they're telling you it can do. It cannot write a full screenplay that is any good. It can do single images, but they have major limitations. It's not the tool they're telling you it is. It could be a tool that artists could use with what they do to generate, let's say, some sort of comp work or some sort of early takes, some sketches, some idea. I think it's good for idea generation. So far, it all looks like trash. It's mostly unable to create real context. Its scripts are not good, but they could be used as a tool. So you could use an AI to help you generate a script to figure out some structure. But again, it's the problem it's going to face, and there's going to be lawsuits on this, is that it steals from people who do not give permission to train it. So they will tell you, no, there's so many you can't tell what it steals. And that's not true. All the things that feed into it are identified. And so there'll be lawsuits. It is currently not able to be trademarked or copywritten. So that will impede some of this stuff. But it's going to be a fight. We're going to have to fight people trying to steal our jobs. And that's, it's basically this a way for a certain kind of market to close off the kind of people that they didn't want to deal with ever, but it doesn't exist without us. So, and I've never seen it. It does not generate good cartooning. It's terrible cartooning. Cartooning relies on the eyes of a person and the voice of a person. It does terrible comics. They're shit. They're not readable. The storytelling is bad. Could that change? I guess. But I think also, if the people who made this shit if they try to market it towards a tool for creatives, not a way to replace creatives, I think it would be more useful, and we wouldn't have to deal with this just gross manipulation of the perception of this technology by executives who are trying to scare us. That's what they're trying to do.
I hear they're right now currently replacing journalists, and they're replacing extras in movies. They're using some sort of technology, or or even if you offer your face once, they owe it for perpetuity.
Well, so far it doesn't work. Like everything is sort of around, oh, this will work. And again, like the journalism thing, the way that it's being used is that it has to go in and steal all that information from someone else and summarize it. Which that means someone had to write it, right? Someone had to write those. You can't just like watch something happen and create a news article. A person can do that. The AI cannot do that. It has to steal and regurgitate, And so it's not going to be what they say it is. But also we're going to deal with a bunch of crappy stuff because the people who make the stuff don't care about whether it's good or not. So that's the other side. And there's my rant. Sorry.
All right. If you're not worried, I'm not worried.
I'm worried that it cuts out entry-level jobs. I'm worried that it is used to drive down wages. It cannot do what they say, what they want it to do. Especially not if we don't give them our stuff to steal from.
Okay. Well, I feel better now. Thank you.
But also be concerned. And also, it's always something to point out to people when you hear them lie about it, that's bullshit.
Okay. All right. So one last Masterverse question. And then we're on to the new stuff. So in Masterverse issue 4, you had a terrific story titled Unfakeable, featuring the characters from the Netflix 2021 CG children's show, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. with art by, it was Pez, right? Daniel Lopez. And Daniel's art was spot on. It was brilliant. And reading the story and seeing his art often felt like I was watching a new episode from the show. Now, Rob David from Mattel, the showrunner from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, dropped some hints that even though the animated series is done on Netflix, that he may be continuing the adventures of his show, that iteration, in another medium.
Ooh.
So I see where your answer is going to be. So I was going to ask you, is it possible, that what Rob David is hinting about is the comics, is possibly Daniel Lopez returning and the great Tim Seeley returning to do its story?
I mean, I haven't heard anything yet. That would be a lot of fun. The thing that Rob brought to this, what I think is really interesting, is that he's bringing in the artists who work on these shows to do the comics. So, so we've got Eddie Nunez, who designed the characters. In fact, the background of your of this platform right here, he's doing the art for the Masterverse or Master Revelation series, and that Pez is one of the guys who works on that show. So that's so cool that these guys are able to bring their aesthetic and their design to the comics, which is what makes them so connected to those animated shows. So, man, that'd be awesome. I would love to work on that stuff. My daughter loves that show. In fact, when we're in the car, she always says He-Man song, and I have to play the Power is Yours, Power is Ours. I have to play it like 3 times. I have that song just etched in my brain. So she loves it. When we ever talk about He-Man, that's what she references. It's that show that she loves. Yeah. So, I mean, I would do it just to have something to connect with my kid on, additional to connect with my kid on. So yeah, I love it. I'm glad that show exists. I think is one of the best versions of Master Universe I've ever seen. And there's some of those episodes, like the one where He-Man and Skeletor have to sort of keep that machine busy and they keep moving, so they do that dance. They do like that's so great. Some of my favorite stuff. And Brian Q. Miller was a writer on there. Some of the other writers I know from comics were writers, and so they did awesome stuff with that show.
Did you get your daughter some of those figures from the show?
Yeah. So she has Trampjaw, Evelyn, He-Man, a couple He-Mans, a Battle Cat, and then I have Ram Man because that's my favorite. But I'm sure sooner or later that will end up on the floor in her bedroom.
I hope more comes out in Masterverse. We have I have the He-Man, I have the Skeletor, but I was hoping more of that subline would come out. Maybe like a Merman, and because I really love that Merman design. But nothing yet. I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're making the CG kids show toys anymore, and maybe those didn't sell well, and that's why we haven't seen any more, because that was pretty early introduced on Masterverse in 2022, I think. Yeah. So, and we haven't seen any since. So maybe it didn't sell well, and maybe it's just a dashed hope.
I managed to get Mosquitara, which that's like one of the only ones that was completely new to the show, and I thought that design was awesome. Cool.
Yeah. I actually saw some discounted. I almost picked them up. They were like at like Big Lots or something like that. They were like on heavy clearance, but it's like,
yeah,
it's like, this is already hard on my wife. All the things I have. If I start collecting another line, she might have to come after me. So, and she's my better half. I don't want to do that. Yeah. So
you start putting your figures in the bedroom, then it's too late.
I once did that, Tim, and it was like little by little, and then one day she's like, "What's going on there?"
Because maybe you left it there, but after that, like, no.
All right, so let's talk Masters of the Universe, Forge of Destiny, and this is a 4-issue comic series that has been billed as a year 1 prequel story for both Masters of the Universe Revelation and Revolution. So can we talk about its genesis? Like, can you say whose idea this prequel series was? Was it Rob David's over at Mattel, or
Rob.
was
always Rob? Yeah, it's always Rob. He's always the one with the idea. Yeah.
And what was, See, year one is different. I understand like a straight prequel series. So what was the goal of this series? Was there one or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the big things was we wanted to do a Master Universe series that wasn't, like as Rob and I talked about it, all the ones, especially the ones I've written, it's always like some big event, and it always ends in Castle Grayskull with someone, duking it out over the multiverse, and everybody's like, and we wanted to just do stories like a Master Universe story, and something that would fit into sort of the long, legacy of stuff that has come before, but also would be something that played off some of the character relationships. So a big part of it had to be, let's get into the He-Man, Tila, Prince Adam triangle, and let's get into the King Randor, Man at Arms relationship, and let's get into the Skeletor, Evil Lyn relationship, because they're all very important to Revelation and Revolution.
Right.
So, this was a way to sort of like do a story that plays just like, hey, there's He-Man stories where stuff happens in Eternia and He-Man has to do some stuff, and it doesn't necessarily involve multiverse versions or some big final battle at like,
which are fun.
Yeah, right. But I feel like we've sort of gone a few years without having like that kind of story that would have appeared in the old mini comics, would have appeared on the old cartoon, or would have appeared in a storybook that the Golden Books or whatever. And this allowed us to do all that stuff with a real focus on bringing in a couple of characters that sort of didn't get any time on the show, and then also to really go hard on the ones that do, like the really important characters. Like, let's explore that the most interesting parts of their dynamics and their personalities.
So in 2021, there was that terrific 4-issue comic prequel series to Masters of the Universe Revelation by Tim Sheridan. Now, in that series, while Tim received script credit, the actual story was credited to showrunner Kevin Smith and then executive producer Rob David. And possibly as a result, it felt extremely connected to the animated series. But in regards to your year one prequel series, Masters of the Universe Forge of Destiny, you don't have these Kevin Smith and Rob David story credits. So were you given more latitude, more free reign in regards to the story you wanted to tell? And then by nature, is Forge of Destiny less bound to the animated source you're prequelizing?
That's interesting. It's not. I don't think I didn't take more latitude. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. I mean, I basically read the scripts for Revolution. I know obviously I'd already seen Revelation, and so Rob kind of told me what he thought it needed. The basic plot is my pitch, and then Rob and I went back and forth and sort of refined like what moments needed to be there. But it's not as tied, if only because the prequel series that Sheridan did, the other Tim S, the one that he did is like, it's a character origin that ties directly into to what they're working on.
The Orlax, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess it's as tied as far as the personalities and the characters go, but it's not as tied plot wise, if that makes sense. But it definitely, sort of thematically, it's very much tied to the show. I think it's very important in that it sets up at least two relationships that are important to Revolution, and then does about three of them that are important to Revolution. Right? Sorry, other way around. Yeah, well, go with that. You're right.
Well, I like you saying it was very important because back in the day, I was really into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I searched out a lot of the prequel comics and was severely disappointed by them, to be blunt. Many of them felt like unnecessarily fluff and cash grabs to me, that never really added anything to the movies that they were prequelizing.
Sure.
They were really frustrating, some of them. That's why several weeks back, talking to Ted Biaselli on this podcast, I was expressing how elated I was with the Revelation prequel comic series that the other Tim S did, because that story was surrounding the Orlax of Primaria, and it added dynamic layers to the show. It was important, right? It was meaningful. And the fact that you're saying this is important as well, and it felt that way as I read it, and we'll get to that spoiler part of the podcast. But, that's my ultimate hope. I think a lot of people's hope when they're reading these kind of things, that it's not fluff, but it adds meaningful layers.
Yeah, and I think it does. I mean, again, it's not like, because it takes place before, Revelation, but also Revolution comes after Revelation, so it's before both of them. But I think it's there's at least one or two plot points that definitely feed into it importantly, and most of it is just good, it's character stuff, like kind of find out why they, their connections are the way that they are, and a big part of it, I mean, really playing up I think the most important one is the Tila He-Man triangle, Adam triangle, because that is one of the most important parts of Revelation. I mean, probably the most important aspect.
Yeah. Your Masterverse Comics was a framing story, and the framing story was also a prequel to Revelation and Revolution. Right. So in regards to continuity, what comes first? Is it Forge of Destiny and then Masterverse?
Masterverse and Forge of Destiny.
Masterverse and Forge of Destiny. Okay.
Probably not by that much. Okay. Like, I was thinking of Masterverse being like within the first few weeks or something after, and then I was thinking of that Forge of Destiny would be about like 2 months, 3 months or something. He's still real green, and it's sort of playing up the idea that when He-Man first shows up, it's unclear, like, where did this guy come from? Who's he loyal to? Is he one of Randor's subjects? Is he some barbarian from the field? And I really want to play up that part of it as the politics, kind of, because I think that's interesting, right? It's like all of a sudden this king gets a nuclear weapon, right? Like, all of a sudden he's got, so I want to play up that stuff and sort of tensions that I think would come with that, and how, the way that we played Skeletor, I think, in the Revelation is that he's this sort of outsider that starts messing with shit, and him being there makes it a question of allegiance. Like, clearly he got Merman and he got Beastman and he got those people, and so who else is on his side? And I I went back to history a little bit for that stuff,
So I don't mean to stop you. I want to get into the weeds of that right in that spoilers section there. So I want to because there are some people that actually listen and then stop and then go get the comic. I even read that in the comments. So I'm going to try and keep them, out of the spoiler territory as much as I can. So let me just grab a few more pieces from you and then we'll jump right into it. So Eddie Nunez, right? It's exciting to have artist Eddie Nunez handling these artist duties on this series, because from what I understand, he was instrumental in creating so many of the Masters of the Universe Revelation models over at Powerhouse Animation. So when I see him draw He-Man and Tila, especially Skeletor, even, it's the characters from the show, right here on the page, and I love it. I mean, it's perfect for him to do a prequel story like this.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's such a get, and that's what the way that Rob runs things is. He's always, he's always talking to everybody that works on stuff, which is amazing, because I don't think any of these toy companies have ever had a guy like Rob who's just like talking to the artists and talking to the comic book people and talking to the book people and the toy people, and he's doing it every day. And so he was able to bring this in to make it work, and that's kind of a coup. I mean, it's so rare to have like an animation designer, because most of the time if you're working in animation, you're like, oh, I don't have time for comics. Also, that seems like a ton of work.
Right.
But we got Eddie to do, and that's awesome.
I just love his work. And you, unlike Masterverse, you have done a variant cover, at least one, I think was for issue 2. Yeah. For this series. And so when you do a variant cover like this, it's just because you maybe have more time to do it?
I don't have any time, but I had to do one. I think it was originally for issue 1, but I think it took us a while to get it colored, so I got bumped to 2. But yeah, it's just I was like, I've got to draw something for this. I gotta,
Okay.
so I used to draw full time,
Yeah.
and I'm sort of a part time artist. And I didn't really, you know, I just wanted to do it so bad. I think I did it like on a Sunday night or something, and but I really liked what it allowed me to do because in this series we, no spoilers here, but it's like a tour across Eternia. So I went in and pulled out all these like, peoples like species that live in Eternia, and I drew them. So I put the kobolds in there from one of the Larry Houston mini comics on my cover. So
Oh, so it's gonna be like full of Easter eggs. Oh, that's awesome.
fun to draw, basically.
Is there a reason why? I mean, I don't know if you noticed this. Dark Horse's solicitations for issue 2, they didn't show us the covers. Actually, they were showing us the covers for Masterverse issue 2. So I have no idea what the 3 covers, including that cover. Was that on purpose, or do you think that?
It wasn't. It was probably goof, probably on Diamond's part, or who knows? I don't know. Somebody goofed.
Okay, so I can't wait to see that. Oh, so, um, focusing on see that. Did you see the San Diego Comic-Con 2023 footage of the 2 clips of Masters of the Universe Revolution that they showed?
No,
Oh,
I was at the show, so I didn't see anything. I was I was probably like at the bar with Mattel while they were showing, so I didn't get to see him. No.
the footage looks great. They had these 2 scenes shown. The first scene, both Teddy said they came from episode 1.
Okay.
Because episode 1 was the only, I think the only episode that was finished. They had the soundtrack laid out, everything, and I can't believe Bear is coming back. I'm so happy about that. And then the first scene took place in, you read the scripts, you're going to know this took place in Subternia, and they were fighting Scareglow, and it looked like they were rescuing, and you don't have to comment, they were rescuing the glove of Fisto and the clamp of Clampchip. They were on like Scareglow's altar, and it looked like they were trying to undo their what Skeletor did to them, sending them to hell. And then the second clip was just a scene of Hordak and Skeletech and Motherboard, and it looks so good. It looked even in the small amount of footage we got, it looks so exciting, and this sets this great tone. You know what it feels like, especially with Hordak? It feels like Thanos, from the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, and in the scripted, well, I don't want to ruin anything, but it's sort of a reimagining, but a sequel in the way that the first one is, that Revelation was. So I think we'll be pleased. It's pretty cool.
And you could talk about this. This is not a spoiler. Gwildor is coming back. He, Kevin Smith said that, they showed the figure and they said Gwildor and Orko are going to be the frenemies, and they're going to be bickering back and forth. And I'm like, this is great.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in the script with those 2.
Yeah, can't wait to see it. So, so right before we get to the spoilers, let's talk about Blue People for a moment on this non-spoiler side.
Okay.
So Masters of the Universe Revelation did this wonderful thing where many fans as children who loved the toys, who loved the Filmation show, and then grew up and cherished these fond memories, but left it all behind. They didn't stay with the fandom. When they returned to the fandom nearly after 40 years, this was because of Masters of the Universe Revelation. And thanks to Masters of the Universe Revelation, they not only re-engaged, but they stayed engaged, and they started collecting these figures. And their passion as children have been rejuvenated, and they've jumped in with both feet as adults, and it was rather wonderful to see and remarkable in a way. And so fans of this series returning that never visited any other medium other than Filmation's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and Masters of the Universe Revelation don't recognize this blue race of people on the cover and simultaneously only know one version of Skeletor. I see them in the comments and in forums. The demon Skeletor, this demon from another dimension. Skeletor being a demon was stated in the Filmation show several times, and we even got to see Skeletor's dimension too in the Filmation show. And Skeletor being a demon was mentioned in the Revelation series a few times. Skeletor calls himself an interdimensional demon. So a few years after the Filmation show was over, and a lot of fans grew up and moved on to other things, there was this mini comic that introduced a possibility that Skeletor would actually be, Prince Adam's long lost uncle, as you know, Keldor, setting up a Star Wars moment one day, I am your uncle. And Prince Adam could go, nah, and fans were kind of split on that idea. And even the mini comics writer, Stephen Grant, was kind of split on the idea, and he didn't really speak of it too highly. But in 2002, as you know as well, Mike Young did the reboot series, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and took that Keldor idea and ran with it. And historically speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, historically speaking, this race of blue people called the Gar was really a device created to flesh out how Prince Adam's uncle, King Randor's brother, could possibly have blue skin, right? I mean, I think that was really the genesis behind it. And, maybe we can't have this conversation without moving to the spoiler side of the podcast. So if you haven't read Masters of the Universe,
Yeah.
Forge,
we know that the Gar in the story because they're on the cover, so that's okay, right?
Yeah. Well, but let me just make that dividing line anyway. If you haven't read Masters of the Universe, Forge of One Destiny yet, and don't want it spoiled, I recommend wherever you're listening or watching this podcast, please press pause, go buy yourself issue 1, either physically or digitally, read it, and then come back and hit that resume button because spoilers are ahead. So introducing this Blue Gar race in the Revolution universe in the Forge of Destiny prequel comic is interesting to say the least. So what was your motivation, Tim, behind inserting these blue people into the continuity? Is there a grander design and connective tissue to the upcoming Revolution series, or is this just something you wanted to introduce?
Well, it was my pitch because what I liked about the Revelation series was that they really played up the long-standing but kind of taken for granted aspect of Master Universe, that it's like a world where there's a balance of magic and technology, sort of. That was one of the big pitches that was so cool for me when I was a kid. Is like, wait, they have swords and laser guns, right? Like that was like, and I feel like it's sort of we take it for granted because we've seen it so many times. But so the idea that I had for this being that it was going to be partially about the sort of politics of Eternia was that if Eternos was a kind of traditionally kind of medieval like place that Adam had grown up, and that it was sort of seat of power, and that there would be this other place that would be sort of the opposite. And so we introduced Anwar Gar as like a sort of cyberpunk, like sort of hermit nation kind of, and so the idea is like that they're or that they withdrew from the world when too much magic started hanging out, and they felt pretty uncomfortable about it, and so they withdrew and to their island, and now they're essentially an envoy is being sent to sort of check on them. Where do they stand? This dude shows up. He's a demon alien from another place, and where do you stand? Are you with us? Or are you against us? Are you going to go with him? And so that's kind of the impulse for the entire story. And obviously, the Forge of Destiny comes into play here, as you've read the first issue, because it's essentially this idea that if He-Man is the nuclear weapon, like all of a sudden there's proliferation, and now everybody's got to have a balance. Like, well, if you can send this guy who can lift a house, a castle, and throw it at us, we need something else. And so that's kind of the politics of the story, and that's why I wanted to bring in Anwar Gar, because I'd never seen it played with. We heard a lot about how it was this great place in the 2002 series, but it was just this empty kind of it was just full of robots, I guess, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to see it like what was it like at its height, and there was nothing to say in this version of the story that it didn't still exist. So I want to just do a scene where like He-Man is running around the streets of Anwar, and it's like all blue and pink lighting, and there's like flying cars, and I just want to do all that shit. But on the other side of it, it's kind of like Cuba. It's like been closed off from the world for so long, or North Korea, that
Yeah.
like they're not bringing anything in, and all their stuff is kind of falling apart. And so it just made for, I don't know. I just thought that would be such an interesting setting, and it would also allow me to bring in some other characters, which aren't in some of the other stuff. So we have Dash, and we have Web Store, and we have all these other characters that weren't really part of the main Revelation story that I could sneak in.
So, well, originally, and this is going to be for the Filmation fans and toy fans that are here for Revelation and here for those prequel comics, and like I said, never explored much of the lore. I think the Gar history was originally set up with the classics Motu lore, where Queen Marlena, and I know she didn't mean it, but Queen Marlena is on her like Rainbow Warrior spaceship, and she opens up a black hole on purpose, for some sort of space travel, bursts through the Gar planet, destroying it unintentionally, on her way to Eternia. And then the Gar people, I guess some of them just escape in the nick of time before the full planet explodes. They're on a spaceship and then get stuck in some kind of time vortex and land in Eternia, but it's not pre-Eternia in this continuity, but eons past they land, and much earlier, many years before Queen Marlena actually shows up. And then, like you said, they they have all this technology, and the indigenous people never saw technology like this before. And then there's jealousy, and then there's wars that ensue. So how much of this, because this is a different continuity, how much of this continuity in your mind is carried over?
I mean, I probably wouldn't do anything with the time travel portal thing, and I probably, just because that's cool for classics, and it made for amount of toys. It's a little confusing.
Yeah.
In a comic, I kind of felt like all you really need to know, and I really want to stick with the big theme ideas, is that it's this is the sci-fi city, and it's next to the fantasy city, not right next to it, but so I thought that would be like the way to do a story that I hadn't seen exactly told before. But we know, like, just from the way that we know they have cool laser guns and crazy ships, and where did that stuff come from? And I also wanted to do like when the Gar show up, like they have their own stuff, like they, and maybe there's a story to be told that I'm not here, but like maybe they built all that shit back in the day. Maybe they built like the Talon fighter, and maybe they built all that stuff and exported it and traded it or something. And now they still. So I want to have like a cool thing where you see like it's like a seafaring people, and they have all these crazy vehicles, and they have like a water roton. I want to make, it's called like a hurricaner or something. I can't remember what we call it, but just like cool stuff like that. Like put stuff in here that gives us new toys. That's the job.
And I love this this balance of power that you set up, and the distrust, because it's Gar versus Grayskull, it's technology versus magic. And after a great war occurred, you had said that the Gar had lost their influence, because no matter what technological device they created, it was always outdone by magic, right? And magical weapons and artifacts. And so there was no trust, no balance. But King Grayskull, in his continuity, even the playing field by giving the Gar that ancient metal, I don't recall the name, imbued by magic, that could be forged into weapons to fight magic.
Right. It's called Phlogiston, which is named after Phlogiston, which was a theory back in the medieval days, that's where heat and fire came from, was this fluid called phlogiston that was like kind of just it was like an invisible sort of force that created fire. That's where we got the name from. You have to be a real nerd to know that stuff.
You know what? I love that nerd stuff. So I'm glad you told me. You know, and I love that line, you know, you use like you said, you are never more powerful than when you are willing to give up power. And it's such a nice line, and it's so fitting for, you know, the series you're prequelizing, you know. It's such a it's a running theme through that. And I just love that and I thought it was so cool that you said or in your story that Man at Arms position was specifically created to balance the Gar's technological expertise. That was cool, you know, because I don't think we ever got an origin for Man at Arms, you know.
Yeah, that is definitely a Rob idea. I think I can't remember. It was definitely something we talked about, but yeah, that the position was like going back. You know, there's other Man at Arms before Duncan, and that they were there to put in place to sort of like as part of this deal. But I thought that was really cool.
So I really love what you were saying in regards to the impact of He-Man on Eternia, because you know, this story you expect, you know, it not only focuses on the introduction and subsequent impact of Skeletor on Eternia and how obviously bad that could be, but also the introduction and impact of He-Man on Eternia and how bad that could be. And that's something, you know, you don't expect before you read this, but because He-Man's arrival changed everything. You know, He-Man's origins and loyalties, as you said, were unclear, and to all of Eternia at this point. And the fact that some considered He-Man this warrior with godlike powers, an extension of King Randor, I could see it concerning him, you know, because it is equivalent to Eternos, like you were saying, getting a nuclear bomb, which may ultimately upset the fragile balance of power of Eternia. And it never dawned on me before, but I get it and I love it, you know, because if Eternia was a real place, you're raising viable questions and concerns that I never considered before as a fan, never thought of before. But as your comic brings them up, I'm like, duh, naturally, you know, naturally this would be the first response, you know, and it's so great.
That's why I get the big bucks, man. There you go. That's it. There.
No AI wrote that story.
I had to be a dork with a bunch of toys for 40 years to get around that one. So.
And you know, I love you touching upon those alliances where Skeletor has secured the alliance of Beastmen and the Aquaticans. So Randor now is shoring up his alliances, you know, and it feels like, you know, chess pieces on a chessboard, you know, and it's a race against time. And there's this real cool political intrigue, you know, Game of Thrones type of stuff going on. And I guess there is a balance with bringing palace intrigue into He-Man comics too. You know, I mean, what I always go to is like Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. You know, some finding those boring trade disputes going on.
Right, that was too much, and this is like, I think, you know, we use it more as a way to start a story instead of, you know, as a backdrop. Right? But I was thinking that same thing. It's like you can't, you know,
heavily
do it, but it also, I don't know. I feel like if you're going to do this stuff now, Master Universe stories, and they're primarily for adult readers, like, you know, I mean, I don't think it makes it boring. I think it makes it interesting. I think, you know, and just sort of a natural extension. Like, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but you know, it's a way to do a new take on this stuff. Keep it fresh, keep it interesting, keep you thinking, and hopefully just make more toys. That's the job.
You know, and I think it, and you at least with issue 1, that's all I've seen, you've hit the right balance. But I think it also been neat, and don't mean to be your editor here, to have a comic panel, like some real estate dedicated to the alliances made with Skeletor and the Aquaticans and the Beastmen, because I would I would love a page dedicated to that, like what did Skeletor promise them, or what did Skeletor threaten them,
Right. And I mean, we've seen versions of that, like going back to the mini comics, like when he would bring in Trapjaw, Triclops, like you would see that stuff.
Yeah, that's fair.
You never really saw, you never really saw it. I know in the Robert Kirkman wrote the Icons of Evil one back in the day for MV Creations. They did a thing with Beastman, like how like Keldor like walked up to his, his people and like whooped his ass in a fight, kind of, and then that's how he. So I've seen versions of it, but yeah, I wish. I mean, man, if I had more issues, hell yes, that would be great. I would love to do more of that stuff.
And Tim, you got to bring in, I know we were talking about this before, and I'm just begging you to do this. You got to bring in that Beast Woman at some time.
Yeah.
The one that Nate did, the one that modeled Raquel Welch from 1 million years BC, that famous poster.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I wish, that's the thing is I wish I had room for all this stuff. Like
Yeah, I guess.
I had room for a Beastman in general. I just had, like, and I felt like if they were well defined in the Kevin cartoon, then I would be like, well, let's bring in, I don't have a big arc for Beastman. I don't have a big arc for Merman, but I have a big arc for Evil Lyn and stuff. It's like, well, let's bring in someone we want to see. So that's why Web Store is here and some other stuff.
That's fair. I mean, were you given any like strict guidelines on like what characters you can use, can't use, what locations you can use, can't use, or?
Nope.
Okay.
Pretty much. I mean, yeah. The way that we talked about it, it was like my pitch was I want to show like the rest of the world, and so I listed like some of the sort of tribes and species of people that we'd see, and I got the okay on all those. So yeah, I try to put in and just stuff that I always wondered about, like when I was a kid, the kobolds and the gnolls and all this sort of stuff. I don't know. I just want to know, and so I don't get to explain much to you, but it'll be cool.
Yeah, it's fun to get into the nitty gritty, And you know what was also fun? It was fun to see Hurricane having the same sort of situation going on, or at least perceived situation that King Randor has with Adam, his heir to the throne, where she's more embarrassed of Dash, aka Cyclone, than Randor is embarrassed of Prince Adam. So it was fun to see that, like, parallel there.
Yeah, that was a big part of this. Is I wanted to have like an anti-Adam, so because there's a storyline you kind of saw in a lot of the animated stuff was like some people would come to visit and they would have like some snotty kid from some other, like there was lots of episodes that had characters like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something like that, but kind of turn it on its head a little bit, like see him deal with, another kingdom's version of himself, and have him be similar, but sort of the opposite.
And speaking of Adam, the cover you use is so funny here, where he runs off to transform into He-Man, and his excuse of like not being around is he's being a woman chasing playa, as they call it, that he's sleeping around with many women and engaging in frivolous relationships is quite humorous. Now that is strictly just his cover, right? He's not really being so promiscuous.
I mean, not anymore. Maybe he was. Maybe he, I mean, it goes back to remember the DC series that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was like his cover all the time. He was always like walking in with like a bunch of two maidens on each arm or whatever, So like that's where I pulled it from. And again, we don't know, we don't need to know, but certainly it does bring in later because that's kind of his job is to entertain. He's supposed to like talk to these other lieges and these princesses and princes and so we do see him with the princess of the leopard people or the jaguar people, right? So yeah. Panther people.
I remember that comic. I remember I remember they're like, where's Adam? The king and queen, they were much older in that comic.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Adam like jumps out from the bushes behind him. And next thing you know, there's this woman coming out of the bushes. And she's like, Adam, are you coming back?
Yeah. I love that stuff. I mean, I know, whether it sort of holds up and whether even then it was a little bit like racy for a kid, but
It probably was.
yeah, but
Well, maybe not back then. Conan was
read
really...
it a couple different ways, and plus it's like even more innocent than most Archie comics. I mean, Archie's always making out with everything, so it's totally fine. But I thought that was such a. It's also like a reason why Tila's always like, oh, like that. That's because she's like this, really strong woman, and she's like got this position, and she would always just be like, and there you are, like finding all the like just the the dumb ninnies and like taking advantage of your like she would be so disappointed. I felt like that was such a interesting character connection there that and even though he's clearly like got feelings for Tila, he has to keep up this thing where he's like, yeah, it was it was the princess of the Jaguar people. I had to make out with her, like like he has to fake it out. I love that stuff. I love that tension. That's my favorite sort of superhero trifecta, love triangle stuff.
And it's so good, Tim, because you have this heavy dynamic where Tila is starting to resent Adam. She was going to be promoted to, what was that, the Earl of the Army, the Earl Marshal of the Army. But Adam started acting up, because of his secret job as He-Man, of course, but disappearing, acting like a fool, running away from danger. And then suddenly her new job is to fixate on Adam and make him the man that his father wants him to be. So, I can't even imagine the guilt that Adam must be feeling, And when Tila says, I can't respect you anymore, that because Adam has everything and he's taking it for granted, while He-Man is out there giving everything of himself to others. What a person Adam is to still keep that secret to protect her. I mean, I don't think I could do it. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm He-Man.
Yeah.
I just
that's the torment. That's the that's the real conflict for Adam is that he doesn't, and it's why I know there's this sort of like sometimes it's kind of uncool to have a character who turns into some other guy. And I know Clark Kent in glasses is not that big of a change, but it's like, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's about what it means, like it's what does it mean to be someone else? And that guy gets the credit and you don't. And then you get in trouble for being that guy. Like that's the superhero story. That's Superman. That's, that's Billy Batson and Shazam. That is Spider-Man. Like that's all the most important ideas there of like what makes a can't must superhero story. And I loved that about the going back to the DC series, the Paul Kupperberg one, and then the original animated series. Like that was part of the story.
Yeah, and Adam to me, at least with Clark Kent, Adam to me is much more interesting than Clark Kent because Clark is hiding his true identity while Adam is trying his best to preserve his true identity.
Yeah, that's great.
And
that's really,
yeah, and what his loved ones feel about him, So it's
then the other side of it that and I hadn't ever thought of it, but I was thinking about this book is like Adam actually. He's less powerful as He-Man than he is as Prince Adam, because as Prince Adam, he is the heir to the entire planet, and then he becomes his less power, which is so great. And it's like I don't know why I'd never thought of that before, but I was like, we have to talk about that here because what is power? Like yes, he can punch real hard, and yes, he can throw stuff, and yes, yes, he's got this lightning sword, but Adam, if he wanted to. And you go back to sort of the history of kings and the sort of royalty, like he could anything he wants, he could make happen. People would listen to him and they would do it for fear of their own lives. And that's power. Like that is what rich people have fought for the entirety of human history is the power to be able to say whatever and do whatever they want and have people do things for them. That's what they want. And so like the idea, and that's why bloodlines are created. They're fake. But this whole thing that's created, that this is this God King, this person was given this powers, so they can hang on to that. That's it. So I feel like we have to kind of talk about it. I mean, it doesn't have to be everything, but it's got to be a theme, and it's got to be about what does he give up?
Yeah, that's got to be brutal. Oh, speaking of brutal, Evelyn, the way she roasts Dash's buddies. Holy cow, those corpses. I was like, wow, is that like brutal? But it's in line with the Revolution cartoon,
Yeah, I also kind of felt like she would probably kind of offhand it, and she kind of be like, kind of feel bad about it, probably a little, but she's also like, they were in the way. And that's just how, I think she's a bad person because all she cares about is power, but she's also like, she has some amount of sort of awareness of other people in a weird way that even sort of Skeletor lacks, I think, and you see that as Revelation plays out, because she can work with Tila as in Revelation as she did, but she's also just like, she would stab you in the back in a second with no compunction, and she would stab Skeletor in the back with no compunction at any moment. He knows that, and that's what makes that's why they are with each other, right? They both know what the other one is, and it's kind of the basis of their entire romance, right?
But speaking of romance, speaking of Evelyn, speaking of Revelation, and go ahead, Tim, call me crazy if I'm crazy, but did you notice a glint in Evelyn's eye in Masters of the Universe Revelation every time she talked about Man-at-Arms, being the most dangerous man of the universe? And
I put it into Masterverse. I thought, because you remember that, yeah, right. The
Man-at-Arms for her.
I love that story. The one where you see this sort of crime noir sort of thing, and they're stuck together because they both lost their connections. So yeah, I forgot to mention that. That was the Vic Dos Santos one. That's one of my favorite ones in the entire thing. I forgot to talk about it earlier, but I love that one. So great.
And what was the artist?
Vic Dos Santos. Victor Dos Santos.
He loved it too. He was so proud of his work. He was showing like so much off on social media, not just his cover, but his interiors. And yeah,
I've talked about it so many times, but yeah, I love that one. So great.
Yeah, that is a good one. All right, what else do we have left? It's just one issue. Battle Cat. I noticed in the first issue, it appears that Battle Cat doesn't talk here like he did, or rather didn't, in Masters of the Universe Revelation. So is that intentional? Is it organically to connect with Revelation? Because Kevin Smith did reveal, it was during the 40th anniversary panel at San Diego Comic-Con 2022, that Battle Cat will finally talk in Masters of the Universe Revolution. It was a decision he made in Revelation not to have him speak. And then he played around with the idea, and they decided, who was the actor playing Battle Cat and Cringer? Escapes me. But he did such a good job that they even wrote like extra lines for him because it was just fantastic. So was this conscious, or am I just reading too much in a couple panels of issue 1 where he just goes rawr and doesn't say anything?
The rule, as I understood it, was that before then he doesn't talk.
Okay.
He does have Cringer, of course, and he gets quite a few lines in this, but Battle Cat doesn't talk. I mean, it's fine. It's it kind of works, and we don't. That's the other hard part, I think, sometimes about having He-Man run around on Battle Cat is like, then he's always got like his best bro with him, and for this I needed him to be alone. So, well, you'll see. We separate them, and I think it works pretty well.
And I like that it was organic, that there was that thought process behind it. So, and then maybe one more thing would be Web Store, and maybe I'm not remembering it from the 2000X series, or maybe my eyes deceived me, because there was an angle of the art where Web Store looks miniature in size. Did I see that correctly?
No, I hope not. He's not supposed to be miniature.
Okay. So it's the way because Evelyn had called her tiny spider or something like that.
Yeah, I think that was just an insult. Yeah.
Okay, and the way Webstore was climbing down, it looked like Webstore was climbing down right next to Skeletor. I guess the way it was drawn. So I was like, does he have an ability to shrink in size? This is something new. So okay, so this was just
No, it must have just been perspective. Forced perspective.
okay. All right, all right. So look, to wrap this all up in a nice bow here. Back in 2021, I guess I was debating someone about the quality of Masters of the Universe Revelation. Obviously, I loved it. But this person I was debating with, very nice guy, I think his name was Dice, he didn't, love it so much. So we came to an interesting impasse or understanding where I said, I love the 2016 Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And my favorite moments were those emotional character moments over and above the action. And he said to me the opposite, where the action for him was the best part. It superseded by far the emotion. So knowing where I come from, the first issue of Forge of Destiny really spoke to me. In regards to all of the characters' interactions, especially between Tila and Adam. But even when Skeletor yells "No," and sends like chills through Evelyn's and Webstore's spines. Does Webstore have a spine? I guess so.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to me. And so far, after reading, issue 1, I found it a wonderful counterpart to Masters of the Universe Revelation. So bravo, Tim. Very well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, for me, action doesn't mean anything if we don't care about the characters. Otherwise,
Yes.
There's a difference between action and mayhem. Mayhem is sort of watchable for a little while, and but then you lose the connection to who's imperiled, and you don't care why, and so and who's leveling up, and who all these sort of things that we care about when we see any kind of action fiction. So, but yeah, there's plenty of action in this one, and there's a huge extended fight scene in 2 and 4. But I was more interested in what makes them characters we care about. I was more interested in that.
And you're hitting the bullseye for me. So, and I'm just eating it up.
Well, I'm glad. Great.
So, Tim, before we wrap this up, do you have anything you would like to add or let the audience know that we didn't touch upon today about Masters of the Universe, Forge of Destiny, or anything else, you're working on, perhaps?
I think that's all of it. I think you got it.
Okay. So this is a wrap all. We want to thank Tim for joining us today. You've been fantastic, as always. Once again, great as always. And I'd also like to thank Caitlin and everyone at Dark Horse and Mattel for making this episode a reality. And especially, I would like to thank our wonderful community out there for listening and watching this podcast. And just a reminder, you can get issue 1 of Masters of the Universe Forge of Destiny today at comic shops and digital stores everywhere. And be sure to check out the Masterverse trade paperback coming out this October 17th. Now, if you enjoyed this show, please show us your support by liking and subscribing to our streams. You can always drop us a line by sending an email to foreternia@gmail.com. We really do love the feedback. And stay at foreternia.com for all the latest updates and news, as well as links to our social media pages like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram that can help you stay up to date with all the Masters of the Universe Revelation, Revolution, and Forge of Destiny content. So that's it. I want to thank you again all for listening, and let the power return. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.